Welcome to the Pastured Pig Podcast, where we share the successes and challenges of raising pigs on pasture. We talk to producers all over the country, from small homesteads to large commercial pasture operations. Whether you're new to pastured pigs or have been raising hogs for decades, we hope you hear new ideas and new perspectives on pasturing hogs. Here's your host, Troy McClung.
All right, well, it's Pastured Pig Podcast time again. It seems like it just happens over and over again very quickly. Well, actually, it does, because I do a lot of interviews in a group. Says, didn't I just do this yesterday? Yes, Troy, you did do this yesterday. But excited to put some things in the queue. In fact, we're going to have to, I think we're going to have to pump the brakes a little bit, just for the fairness of our interviewees, our guests. What we're running into is a situation where I'm recording this bumper, and so again, recording the bumper the day that I record the episode, and I'm trying to stick with a consistent schedule. So it seems like my sweet spot is a podcast every 2 weeks. If I try to do more than that, it's a swing and a miss. If I try to do less than that, then I kind of start to lose interest in the podcast itself. And it's kind of like, well, okay, I've gone 3 weeks, I'll just go 4 weeks. Well, I've gone 4 weeks, I'll just go 5 weeks. So I'm forcing myself, I am, nay, even say carving it in stone to stick with a podcast every 2 weeks. So with that being said, the number of great guests that we've had here has made us push all the way back out to where we are now. So as you're listening to this episode, and I think this should be episode 129, as you're listening to this podcast was recorded almost 2 months prior. So it's, for fairness of the guest to say, oh wow, I did a recording with Troy in August. Wait, you mean nobody's going to hear it until October? That's kind of a drag. I'm going to, obviously I still want to get people on the schedule, but if you reach out to me and you want to be on the podcast, or you've got a good idea or something, we'll schedule it, but I just may schedule it, maybe 3 or 4 weeks down the road. So I'll go ahead and get you on the calendar, get you in a slot, but we may just kind of push it further out versus the way I've been trying to do this within. If you reach out to me, we get you, we say, yes, let's get you on the podcast. Usually I'm getting that recording scheduled within 1 or 2 weeks. So don't fret if you get a response back from me, say, hey man, that'd be great. Will you be available in about 4 or 5 weeks from now? Obviously a lot can happen in then, but I think that's probably the good balance we need to find there. So anyway, with that being said, I try, as I do these bumpers, I try to think in my mind, it's like, where are we? Well, I'm sitting here in hot drought, and by the time you're listening to this, hopefully the drought is broken, and we're actually getting into cool temperatures. So maybe the future me will be like, hey, Troy, that's actually what happened. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, so got some exciting things. Kelly and I have been sitting down, kind of going through a whole review process, just auditing everything we do. My goodness, between my marketing business that is what I consider the summit of the peak, the most important source of livelihood for our family, and then of course all the other things, farm related or social media related, that trickle out beside that. We've been doing a full audit of that and saying, okay, what do we need to do to hone, to sharpen, to change, to maybe put to bed, or to start new? And so part of that auditing process includes the podcast. So excited to have a fresh look at that, even have some outside help with Kelly and some others just taking a look at that, giving me some suggestions on what we'll do. So nothing definitive yet, but you'll hear it as episodes come along, as we try to implement things. Okay, so let's stop belaboring the point and let's move on to our discussion. Today, I have a conversation with Justin Slaughter, and he has Slaughter Family Farm over in Kentucky. And what I enjoy about this conversation, and we kind of get deeper into the weeds of it near the end of the interview, but we're building up to this idea that Justin quit a white-collar job as an insurance agent, which some of you may be saying, why would you ever give up an insurance agent job? Those guys, when they get established, they can make some serious bank. But I really appreciate his take on this, and I appreciate his effort, how he did it, how he's able to transition, and then how he's been able to turn his farm into a very profitable business for him. So it's not like he went from eating caviar to eating roadkill. He's made that transition. He's weathered the valley of transitioning from one profession to the other, and really just, my goodness, he's hitting the gas pedal, growing his farm. Pretty neat what he's doing there. In fact, we talked, we may have him back on, maybe 6 months down the road to do a deeper dive into his experience, and then even his suggestions for people considering doing the same. That transition, it's like, okay, if I quit my job, how do I still pay the bills, and how do I start up something new in farming or a rural lifestyle? So I think that's kind of cool. So we touched upon that a little bit in this episode. But enough of me yammering. Let's get into the conversation with Justin, and I'll catch you guys on the tail end. Today, we are just going west across the river into Kentucky, and we're talking with Justin Slaughter from Slaughter Family Farms. Welcome, Justin.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
All right. So obviously Kentucky is a huge state as far as ground covered. So are you Eastern Kentucky, Central Kentucky, Western Kentucky? Where do you fall into that?
Yeah, we're considered Central Kentucky.
Okay. So between that Lexington, Louisville area type of thing.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, kind of smack dab in between it.
All right. So tell me a little bit, give me that 40,000 foot elevation. Tell me a little bit about Slaughter Family Farm, maybe some of the history behind it, how you got into this, and then we'll get into the details here in a second.
Yeah, so the story is actually pretty interesting. I was a independent insurance agent. And in 2017, I took my daughter out to a farm. They were like, it was a fall thing. We were picking pumpkins, and she saw all of these chickens and asked if we could get chickens in our backyard. So in 2017, I went and bought a ton of laying hens, and we started with chickens. And then I kind of just fell in love with it and started farming in 2018 on borrowed ground. And then we ended up purchasing our property right at the beginning of the pandemic. And so at this time now we raise forest pork, pasture raised, free roaming chickens, turkeys, ducks, no cattle, just because we don't have the land. But yeah, that's kind of where we're sitting right now is pork, chicken, turkey, and duck.
Yeah.
And we do it full time.
Okay. Excellent. So that you're kind of feeding the cliche that chickens are the gateway animal into everything.
Yeah. It seems like everybody starts with egg layers, and then they realize that they want to get more animals, and that's just kind of how it starts.
Yeah. That's kind of an interesting transition. So let's unpack that a little bit. So an insurance agent, I would assume you obviously, the insurance agent, of course, was the full-time gig and keeping you busy, networking, all the stuff that goes along with that. But did you have a rural lifestyle, rural childhood? Were you living rural at that time, or was it like this a total flip of the coin? You went totally different direction.
Yeah. Well, when I was in insurance, I was living in Louisville, which again, not far from Shelby County, but I grew up in Shelby County. The property that we farm is actually right next to my parents. We use some of their land too, and the house that I grew up in. And so I grew up, in rural counties, but I was into, skateboarding and music. So I was constantly driving to Louisville or Lexington to go to shows or see friends. Only really rural thing that I did as a teenager was I used to take care of horses, but I wanted nothing to do with the farmers that I went to high school with, or with farming or working outside. I preferred to stay inside. So I did kind of make a flip from being at a desk, from 9 to 6 or whatever, to now being out in the field, just 10 years later.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's kind of like the old lifestyle, and I can definitely relate to that. I was the same way. I grew up very rural, and and couldn't wait to get out of here. And when always telling myself, when I grow up, I'm moving to the city and doing this and doing that. And I guess I did that to some
Yeah.
degree, but it didn't stick very long. I ended up moving back, and so you kind of, I mean, do you see now? Are things starting to click? You kind of appreciate what you had exposure to in your youth, even though you maybe didn't want to really embrace it. Are you seeing the benefits of that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think once you start, you have a family and you start having kids, things in your brain just kind of switch. And I think for me, a lot of it was I started having an appreciation for working with my hands. And then I felt so disconnected from my family and my children because I was, leaving the home to go work a job, which I know a ton of people do that, but there was just this disconnect and I became unfulfilled
Hmm.
kind of in what I was doing in the insurance world. And so, looking back at, where I was at as a youth, running wild, it's crazy that, all the kids that I wanted nothing to do with are now, still in the county and friends of mine
Yeah.
because we're all doing the same thing. So I do. I mean, I really do appreciate the lifestyle, the work, and then just meeting people who grew up on farms who have just a wealth of knowledge that they continue to share with me.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Yeah, that's good. It's neat to kind of come back, reconnect, and then especially kind of your old stomping grounds. I'm sure you kind of look at things differently. Obviously, things probably look a little smaller than they were when you were younger, but
Yeah,
just kind of seeing how things have changed or things haven't changed in that area. That's kind of neat. So
yeah,
so you,
yeah. It is.
so there's and I think I'm going to stick a pin in this because I want to come back and maybe spend some time on this if you don't mind. The transition
Sure.
from full time insurance to full time farm. So we'll put that on hold for a second because I want to make sure our audience and I can get a better understanding of your setup now. So you're in Shelby County. You're a rural county between Louisville and Lexington. You're able to kind of go back to your home turf, bought a piece of land right beside your folks or where you grew up, and of course that's where you've grown your operation. So tell me a little bit about the land, maybe just how the land lays. It sounds like it's got a lot of wooded versus a lot of clear if you're doing wooded pigs, but kind of the size of it, the lay of it, infrastructure is in place, maybe some of the stuff you had to put in there.
Yeah. So we're farming less than 20 acres. More woods than pasture. I would say, what are we doing? Probably 10, 11 acres of woods, and the rest of it is pasture for, our chickens, turkeys, ducks, things like that, or egg layers. And so we don't have we're kind of a postage stamp compared to a lot of the cattle farms around here who, inherited their grandfather's land and they've got, thousands of acres, but they're still going into town for a job. As far as infrastructure, that's actually a really funny question because when we got into pigs, I basically just bought, pig panels. I thought I'd train them on wire in the pig panels, and then we would run them in the, two or three strands. And, sometimes when they get big, you can get away with one strand. And so infrastructure wise, other than just clearing some trees out, we really didn't have to do a whole lot. And then as time went on and the pigs, the operation started growing, I realized that, I needed more things like, bulk feeders and stuff to kind of free feed them. But I really didn't put a whole lot of infrastructure in. My biggest concern was just keeping the pigs where I wanted them. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we operate on more wooded land than we do pasture land. We even raise our chickens in the woods. So
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. So when you so let's talk a little bit about that path from chicken and some of your other poultry, and then that decision to get into pigs? What led you? I mean, obviously your daughter convinced you about the chickens, so you can't, obviously you can't tell your daughter no in that situation. But
Yeah.
so how did you go from a couple chickens to appease the daughter to scaling this up to the point that you decide to add pigs?
Well, I was actually out at our roller mill, the roller mill in Baghdad, which isn't too far from our farm where we get, 70% of our feed from. This was in, I want to say summer of 2018, and there was a guy there getting feed, and they were having a conversation, and somehow it turned into me saying, I've been reading and watching videos. I'd love to get into pigs. And he tells me, well, I've got this property that needs to be cleared. Would you want to come out and run some pigs on it? I said, are you kidding me? He goes, yeah, no, my wife would love it because she wants more garden area and the pigs would be great for that. So I went on Craigslist and I found, so my introduction into pigs was I got 12 Duroc feeder pigs and bought some electric fencing. I can't even remember where I got it. I might have gotten it from Tractor Supply. Got some step-in post and ran those pigs in his woods, for 7 to 8 months, and they cleared everything out. And I just kind of fell in love with pigs. I mean, they're definitely, of all the animals, they're my favorite animal. They've got the most personality. They're also hard-headed. They can be the easiest and hardest to be around. But yeah, that was my introduction into pigs. I did 12 Durocs, which was kind of biting off a lot more than I could chew at that time. I definitely, those Durocs were escaping, and used to come up behind me when I'd fill the feeders up and just pick me up and launch me out of the way. I almost just didn't do pigs anymore after that because they were just so ornery and hard-headed. But then when I finally got the pigs into to town and direct to consumer, the feedback on the pork was was really great. So I was like, well, maybe I've got something here, and I should just learn to be more patient and see if my setup could be done in a better way so that raising pigs could be a little bit easier on me and my family.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was my introduction to pigs.
Yeah, that's great. So that's kind of a neat start. I mean, I've not heard that a lot. Where I don't know that I've heard of that at all. Where you first start with pigs on somebody else's land and get that experience. But that was neat. That's kind of a neat way to break off and get into that experience. And like I said, probably learned a lot that first year.
Yeah. Yeah, I said things that I regret that first year with pigs. So, me and my wife, we used to have a kind of an agreement that we would, try not to lose it on each other when we were loading pigs to take to butcher. It takes a couple years, I think, to really figure out a good way to get pigs onto a livestock trailer. And, now we've got it down to where we can, load a whole trailer in like, 4 or 5 minutes. But the early goings were really stressful.
Yeah.
I even missed some butcher dates because I couldn't get them on the trailer.
Right. Yep.
So,
yep. I remember those days. Yeah. Freaking out.
Yeah.
No way in the world I can get you guys on there. Yep. So, it's funny. You talk about that, things you say. I joke that if verbal abuse would stunt a pig's growth, we'd never have anything marketable. So
that's accurate. Yeah, there's a lot of tears and a lot of repentance when you're loading pigs for the first few times. So
yeah. I was down in the pig pasture just yesterday with the camera and was far away setting up the shot and looked over and the boar's over. He's just looking at the tripod and I'm like, I know he's going to go over there and knock that thing over. And so, I'm yelling at him. It's like,
try to eat it.
My tripod. Yeah. Yep. All right. So the first year running the Durocs, the 12 Durocs on your neighbor's farm, great experience there. A lot of lessons learned, like you said, blood, sweat, and tears and all that. So despite all of the negative, there was obviously some positive that came out of that. I assume those 12 you were able to sell and turn those into some cash and to recoup some of your cash flow, I assume.
Yeah, it was, right around the pandemic. Butcher dates were really difficult to find at that point. And so I had to kind of break them up. And I think one batch I trucked like maybe 5 hours away into Tennessee just to get them, USDA processed.
Yeah.
And we had started a CSA at that point. And so those 12 pigs moved much quicker than I thought they were going to. And when you're new to it, I'm like, man, I really hope I can sell these because, man, after the feed and piglet cost and butcher, this gets expensive really quick. And maybe I just lucked out, or it was because there was a national emergency going on. The buyers they were there, and so I moved. Of course, the bacon and chops, move like hotcakes, which they still do. But yeah, I moved them, I think, in about a 60-day period.
Yeah. Oh, that's
It
great.
was quick.
Yeah, and to be right up against the pandemic, yeah, that was a
Yeah.
game changer for a lot of things. So, no doubt.
Yeah, both positive and negative. I mean, I've told people that if it probably weren't for the pandemic, we wouldn't be as far along as we are.
Mhm.
We gained a lot of customers that are still with us to this day, that started buying from us just because we were delivering to them
Yeah,
and they didn't have to leave.
yeah, that makes a big difference. So, so you decided. So obviously, you were able to move all of that product pretty quickly, and you decided, okay, now it's time to get our own batch of feeders to put on our own place and take it to that next step. So what were the details of that? What did you decide? Were you going to, okay, the Durocs did what they did, I'm going to do that again, or did you venture out, and what number did you start with when you brought them to the farm?
Yeah, I kind of we stayed with that number. We pretty much were doing at that point 12, 14 a year. And mostly because I was nervous about the pitfalls of scaling too quickly and getting yourself into a situation where you're out of business before you know it. Just from your feed bill gets too high and you're not cash flowing enough. So I still tried to kind of keep it at that level, but I did start venturing out and kind of piecemealing different breeds of pigs to try to find the one that I liked the best, that I felt was good for our operation, did well in the woods and a little bit of pasture, were docile, and produced really good pork. And through the course of that, what we landed on is my two favorite breeds right now is a Duroc red wattle cross that we raise. They're great pigs. They do really well in the woods, and they're a joy to have. And then we have another breeder that I buy pretty much every piglet they drop, and they do a Burke York Hamp mix,
Hmm.
and I really love those pigs too. So which is kind of interesting. I'd never found a cross like that, but I was in a bind for piglets, and I met this breeder, and she was like, "Oh, I've got like 25," and I was like, "Oh, well, let me come and grab them. We'll just see how they do." And I kind of just fell in love with that breed mix. They tend to grow a little bit faster, which I'm assuming is probably that York
Hmm.
genetics, because I think that's what the industry uses. But yeah, they're just really great pigs. You get a bigger belly off of them, so more bacon. A little bit more bacon is always a positive
Yes,
in
absolutely.
our business. So,
Yeah. No, that's
but
good.
but but yeah, go ahead. Oh, go ahead. I'm
Oh no,
sorry.
no, no. I'm just going to transition to that. That's great, and I like the idea. Just you're just kind of exploring things, testing, and seeing what works out, and identifying the characteristics you like, and then of course communicating with that breeder to, hey, can we keep that going, or bringing some of that on farm. Are you doing any breeding on farm now, or are you still just buying feeders?
No, no, we're just buying
Yep.
feeders. I've thought about doing it, but I've just got some really good relationships
There
with
you
some
go.
breeders that I can pretty much pick up almost all the pigs that I need. So I'm not driving to Timbuktu to grab 6 from this person and 12 from this person. And when I've just with how busy we are, it's just me and my wife and our kids. It was kind of an enterprise that I didn't want to add on top of everything else that we've got going on. But, maybe at some point, that could be a conversation.
Yeah, well, I definitely, I'm not a purist that you got to be soup to nuts on all that stuff, and yeah, if the real con of getting feeder pigs, of course, is just being guaranteed you're getting what you want and you're getting a good stock and not somebody's leftovers. So if you've got those good relationships where people are like, hey, I'm kind of custom ordering stuff or custom breeding stuff for Justin because I know he's going to buy it. He's going to take good care of it, that type of stuff, and you've got that relationship, then yeah, you're letting somebody else do a lot of the heavy lifting, and whatever you're paying, a couple $100 or less for
Yeah,
a piglet,
yeah,
that's a no-brainer because you're getting it weaned and you're getting it
yeah,
castrated, and bang, there you go, you're ready to just get them going. And
yeah,
2 months of their life cycle have already been taken care of.
yeah. Well, and it's one of those things too where when you've got somebody who has more experience raising pigs, more experience breeding pigs, the end product, even at the piglet size that I'm picking up for, somewhere between 80 to, $130, um, a piglet, I'm picking up something that somebody else has learned and has the experience in, and I don't have to kind of take the time to learn it and have the full experience in right now. But it's also a relationship that keeps the cash kind of moving throughout the community. And so I really like being able to support other farmers that are breeding that also, go from, the piglets dropping then to my farm where I'm raising them to then put them on the plates of our customers.
Yeah, yeah,
And so it's just a really great relationship to have. I know there's a lot of people that don't have those opportunities or live in states where feeder piglets are just outrageous to purchase. But yeah, I feel like I've just been really lucky to have 3 breeders that can pretty much breed all the pigs that I need.
excellent, excellent. So where have you scaled up now? Where are you in 2024 when it comes to the number of pigs and how you're processing and selling
Yeah,
those?
we did 100 last year. We scaled down a little bit this year. I think we'll finish around 80 something.
Oh, wow.
And really, the reason for scaling down is that at the end of last year, I realized that I had 2 freezers just full of sausage and ground products. And so I got to thinking, I'm like, well, if I get in a bind, I could always probably wholesale from another farmer, bacon and chops. And so I started like making phone calls. And so I've got some things in the works to kind of wholesale from some other farms. But yeah, we were just setting on so much ground product because, with pigs, when we've tried different things with hams, sometimes they move and then they set. And of course, smoking and curing is really expensive. So we'll probably be finishing somewhere in that 79, 80 mark this year.
Yeah, yeah. So your market. So you're doing USDA cuts, and you're obviously keeping those on farms. You've got your freezers. You got that to manage. But how are you? What's your outlet for sales? On farm store, delivery method, farmers markets. So how are you getting that out? Getting the word out?
Yeah, so we've got farmers markets. My wife and I both go to a Saturday farmers market in Louisville, Kentucky. One of them's a summer market that runs from May to the end of September that we do really well every week at. And then we've got another market that runs year round, which we also do really well at that. And then we've got website sales. Our CSA. We've got a buying club, and then we've got wholesale. So I guess what is that? 4 or 5 outlets
Very good.
that we sell through. And most of our pork goes retail, but we do have wholesale relationships with our pork as well.
Yeah, yeah, and as you mentioned in the beginning, this isn't a one species source, right? Because I assume you're doing some chicken, you're doing some other poultry product there as well.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Really our chicken. I know this is a pig podcast, but our chicken is kind of the cash flower
Yep.
of the farm, and the pigs are kind of the pay the home bills
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of operation. I think a lot of old farmers call them mortgage lifters.
Yeah.
That's an accurate term.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that's good. That's one thing that I just harp on all the time. That if you're going to be doing a farm business, then polyculture is key. You can't have, like you said, cash flow. I mean, you're looking at an 8 week life cycle on a chicken primarily. That turns cash way quicker than 8 to 10 months on a bee or on a pork, and then 16 to 24 months on a beef. So it definitely is
Yeah.
that good comparison or that good companion element there to put in place, and then of course value add with eggs and your vegetables and all these other things, whatever you're getting into seasonally. So pretty neat.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's do this. I wanna, maybe we'll kind of camp out here for a bit because one thing I don't know that I've really talked about a lot with our guests, and we've had some that have done like you. They've transitioned from full time, kind of a white collar job to full time farming. So I think there's a lot of people I know, especially more on the homesteading side, not necessarily as much as the Pastured Pig podcast. Um, Audience, but I know there's a lot of people that are like, I would love to stay home, work my farm or my homestead, and generate enough revenue to pull that off. So, if you would talk with us a little bit about insurance agent, of course, has a lot of variables as well. You've kind of got that base income, but it's kind of a performance based industry, so you have a lot of potential to grow and kind of get crazy reciprocal income from that. But there's also the challenges that go along with it. At what point did you say insurance is not for me, it's time to go farming? And then how did you make that economical and logical decision to say now's the time to pull the trigger on it?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. So I guess I'll unpack it kind of going back. I got into the insurance business. It's kind of what my dad has been doing for, gosh, probably 30 something years now. Maybe if he listens to this, he'll correct me. But my dad was an independent insurance agent, and when I was transitioning from my job before that, I had a little baby, with my wife, and so I was trying to figure out how to make a living for my family. And I've always been really good at communication and sales, and so it just kind of seemed like that would be a natural avenue to go down. So I started working for my dad, and kind of learning the ropes of independent insurance. Being an independent insurance agent. And the process of that, I think, is what really has helped me to be able to do what I'm doing now. Because you learn how to get in front of customers, you learn how to sell people, but you're not a sleazy. Well, there are sleazy people in all sales businesses, but you're selling people a product usually on the business side that is protecting what they do every day. And so I was constantly in situations where I was upselling people, not so that I could make more money, but because their business wasn't covered properly. And all of those things I learned from my dad. And, try not to get emotional. Sometimes I get emotional when I talk about this, but really, I wouldn't be able to do this full time and take care of my family if it weren't for those 7 years, 6, 7 years that I spent working with my dad. He taught me how to sell people and to sell them properly and to sell them what they need.
Yeah, ain't it cool?
To sell them things that they don't need. And so yeah, I mean, maybe I'm getting a little off from the question. Maybe my ADHD's kicking in,
Oh,
but
no, you're good. You're good.
but yeah, so I went from, independent insurance agent, being an independent insurance agent, to kind of just being in a place where I was like, I kind of want to explore what else I can do. My time management at that time was not great, and so I was working a lot of hours because I was struggling to really manage my time. And I think had I been great at time management, I'd probably still be in the insurance business. It's a great industry to work in. You meet a ton of amazing people, people who are still friends of mine to this day. Um, but yeah, I kind of decided I'm working too much, and I started, like I said, my daughter wanted to get chickens, and I started really looking into farming. And just like everybody, you can kind of romanticize it until you start doing it. And I just thought, man, this looks like a lifestyle that I could kind of slow down, be outside, be with my family. And so I really just kind of I stepped out of the insurance business, kind of started our small farm business without any land. I didn't have any land at that point. I was using land, and then also my parents let me use some of their land for our chickens at that time. And I went and worked at a roastery, a coffee roastery, just to kind of keep the bills paid.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of that transition. So hopefully that answers part of your question. I think there was another question kind of tucked in there that I
No,
may have not answered.
no, that's good, and that takes guts, and I think that's the key to this. And I can't speak from experience because I haven't done that. I did take a foray from going from corporate to self-employed, but it kind of staying in the same business. So I did have that oh crap moment, where it's like, okay, I don't have a job. I don't work for a company that's going to cut me a paycheck on a regular basis, to now I got to get out and kind of cover the nut myself. I have bills to pay. I have kids. Wife, all those type of things. So I do remember that stone in my gut at one point, thinking, hey, have I made the right choice? But I
Mm-hmm.
think that's maybe the underscore is, there's definitely courage involved in that, but there also has to be wisdom, like you looked at and said, okay, it's just simple math. If I give up this paycheck and I'm going to do this, either raise expenses or even lower expenses, I still have to have a source of income. And there's probably, and I don't want to speak for you, Justin, so I'll let you talk on this a little bit. There's probably a little bit of humility in that, right? So going from insurance agent to kind of being a barista or a roaster at that point, because hey, you got to make ends meet to be able to meet your goals, or to try to reach your dreams. So did that feel like maybe you were taking a little bit step back? Was that a little bit of did you feel like a little bit of a bruise to the ego there?
Yeah, yeah, a little bit. I mean, you go from wearing a, suit and tie every day to, showing up in blue jeans. So I think there was a little bit of, um, like you said, some humility, but I can be fairly stubborn,
Mm-hmm.
which I inherited from my nana, from my dad's side of the family.
Yeah.
I'm pretty hard headed. And so I think once you kind of make that decision, and when I'm sitting there working in the roastery, all that I'm doing all day is listening to podcasts and learning about farming. And I've got this goal, and I've
Yeah.
got this dream, and I'm going full long into it. And sometimes even to the detriment of not listening to the wisdom of others. I mean, my mom was giving me advice that I kind of ignored, and looking back, which I probably should go to her and tell her how much I appreciate some of the things that she told me. I don't know if I've done that, but there were a lot of things that she told me in the process of kind of stepping out of insurance, going to the roastery,
Mm-hmm.
starting the farm up, that had I listened to it, probably would have been a little bit easier those first few years. But those knocks are kind of also what kind of stiffen you
Yeah.
for running a business, and not just a business, a farm business.
Yeah.
So yeah, but there was a little bit of a bruise to the ego, that you go from shaking hands and picking up checks to getting an hourly wage.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And I got to chuckle at myself here. This kind of shows my ignorance. I think I'm misunderstanding what your roastery job actually entails. So unpack that a little bit for me. Explain that for my ignorant mind.
Yeah, so when I was at the roastery, I spent about 3 years there. What we did is it was a local coffee shop, and
Okay.
we brought the beans in, roasted the beans, packaged the beans, and then shipped or delivered the beans. Or I think at that time there were 4 locations that they had kind of built it up to, and so we had a delivery driver. Sometimes I would deliver, and we would deliver coffee to the shops.
Okay.
So that was kind of the business: roasting, packaging, and then boxing up for customers or the other stores.
Okay. Because I'm thinking like a retail Starbucks type of thing. Like you're there just serving coffee and you turn around roasting some stuff, doing that type of thing. So no,
Yeah,
this is more the industry side, behind the scenes type of thing.
yeah, we were in the back. I mean, even though it's a small local owned business, what we did in the roastery was in the back of the building.
Yeah.
So, there was a glass that people could look at us like we were zoo animals. But yeah, we were in the back. I wasn't really behind bar making drinks for anybody.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's great. Yeah, and man, I respect that completely. That we seem to have, at least, well, I can speak from experience. I seem to have, and I think most people in this country do, that with age, as we age in our careers, we just expect to always be moving in this trajectory, this climbing trajectory, to say, well, I'm doing better. I should have more respect. I should have a higher position. I should have all of these things as I go along, and to change that, to flip that on its head, to say, well, suit and tie, to now jeans and a t-shirt, and kind of being treated hourly, and that type of stuff. That's a hit. But I love the fact that you look at that and say, this hit is worth it because it's going to allow me to transition over to pursue my dreams. And so now here you are, just a couple years later, full time. Sounds like things are going great as far as cash flow goes. I'm sure there's still some ups and downs, but you have that. You've come out of that valley. You've turned that dip around, and now you're climbing back up to say, yeah, this is establishing a career that I can support my family with, but also really embrace what I want to do, pursue my dream, and then, of course, just enjoy being outside and enjoying God's creation. I think that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, now definitely that transition wouldn't have been as easy if I didn't have, the support of my wife and even my family, kind of, I guess in the stands, kind of
Yeah.
rooting this on, and as we've gone along, my wife brings value to the table that I can't, and so it just, as you keep doing it, just like with anything, you get better at it. And we definitely, in the years that we've been doing this, we just keep improving. I always joke with people that I meet with, these farmers or even the farmers around me, that I look at what they do, and I'm just astounded at how good they are at farming.
Yeah.
But they can't sell any of their products. It's like, they still go to town, but they're great farmers. And I always feel like if I'm in a room of 100 farmers, I'm the worst farmer in the room. So, but yeah, I mean, if I didn't have the support, that I've had, there's just no way that I would have been able to probably do this at the scale that we're doing it now.
Yeah, that's excellent. Excellent. Well, I'm going to have one quick more talking point, and then I want to be sensitive to your time. But I do want to ask you, because this is, I think, for the next generation at least, maybe the next 2 generations, we're always going to talk about things that happen in our lives, and we're going to use the benchmark of pre or post pandemic. So in your situation, things unfolded just as the pandemic was rolling up. But how, looking back now, how excited are you that, number one, and probably the biggest one, that you acquired your land pre-pandemic and that you made this transition pre-pandemic? Give me some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, with how our county has kind of been growing up post pandemic, I don't think that it would have been possible for us to be able to get in and do this had we not kind of jumped when we did. And I just lucked out being able to farm and work right next to where my parents live, and they've been generous enough to let us use some of their woods for our pigs and land. We've got our garden over at their property, our vegetables and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that I would have been able to, just from a price standpoint, just right at the tail end before, or right at the beginning before the pandemic started, there wasn't this rush of, just prices on everything going up. And it seems like, at least in my area, and maybe it's because we're so close to cities, it just kind of keeps going up. And so, I mean, the price per acre right now would be unattainable for us to purchase and be able to pay our bills and do this full time, if that makes sense. So,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm really grateful that we got in before the pandemic.
Yeah, no, and that's huge, and I appreciate you saying that because it just confirms what I just keep seeing, especially here in West Virginia, and I think anywhere across the country where there's quality rural land, people are seeing that the pandemic created this wake up call. I think it was a much needed wake up call for our culture in general that hey, maybe living on top of one another and in this population density isn't the best thing for us, for our mental health, our physical health, the well-being of the country. And so the cities are kind of emptying out a little bit. Now they'll never be empty, but they're definitely spreading out. Now the downside is, of course, that makes if for those of us still looking for land, that makes a little bit more competition, raises the prices and those type of things. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it peaked, or it spiked after the pandemic or during the pandemic, and it's starting to come back down a little bit, but I don't think it's going to come down much at all. And like areas where you are, I mean, my goodness, you're in a sweet spot there between Louisville and Lexington. Then I think those areas are just going to just keep ratcheting it up. That the cost per acre is just going to go up, maybe just a couple percent each year, but it's going to continue to go up. I don't think we're going to see raw land acreage prices ever again like we saw before 2020.
Yeah, I mean, even in our area, it's kind of priced us out from being able to purchase more land.
Mm.
That's been a difficulty. I mean, it kind of is what it is, and you can, when you're farming and you're running a business full time, being able to pivot and say, okay, I am at a point now where I am uh, pretty much maxing out the land that I have access to, whether it's the land I own or the land that we're farming on a friend's property right now. And I can't afford to go out and buy more land. And so maybe I should start reaching out to people I know to raise things for me who already have land, who are not, and maybe I could turn this into something where other farmers are making a living as we kind of work together, because I really think that that's the only way forward in this, because the barrier to entry is so high right now
Right.
with just the price of everything. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to be able to buy another 10, 15, 20 plus acres, but when it's $25,000 an acre, it's hard to make that
Yeah.
math.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And maybe you have to look for leasing opportunities, like you say, or somebody to at least partner up with you. But yeah, I mean, it is a challenge, and only time will tell. We'll see. I mean, it could be. Goodness, you never know what's coming down the road. There could be something else. Hopefully it's not another global catastrophe, but there could be something that pushes people back into the cities, and or certain area here, certain area there. I see like Florida's booming right now, and some of these other areas
absolutely.
that become population hotspots, and maybe that helps affect pricing one way or the other. Inflation right now plays a part in this as well. But all right, well, I really appreciate the conversation. Good stuff here. But before I let you go, I do want to ask you. I got to ask you the question I ask everybody else. So, Justin, what is your favorite part? What do you like the most about raising pigs on pasture?
Ooh, I I think my favorite part about raising pigs on pasture or in the woods is seeing their ability to explore, and maybe this is a little bit of a cliche, but their natural instincts come out.
Mm-hmm.
Versus some, times that I've been in, commercial, or indoor barn raising pigs. It's just a completely different scenario when you've got pigs out on pasture in the woods versus inside. But I love just seeing them run around and explore and, find those nuts in the tree, that drop from the trees. And then if you just keep up with it and you move them quick enough, you don't have these erosion issues that everybody warns of. But yeah, I mean, that just being around them, their personalities. I mean, they're definitely the most enjoyable animal to raise on a good day.
Yeah. Excellent. Yep, I agree. There's just something when a pig gets to be in its natural habitat and do what it was created to do. It's just a real rewarding to see that. I mean, you can almost tell that, okay, this pig is happy to be doing what it's doing. There's contentment in that. It's an alignment that makes sense. So good stuff. Good answer. Well, Justin, if anybody wants to find out more about you, do you have any type of online social media presence that they could find you?
Yeah, we've got an Instagram account that you could find us. It's just Slaughter Family Farm. I guess you got to put the at before it, maybe. I don't know. I'm not very technology savvy, even though I'm a millennial. But yeah, it's at Slaughter Family Farm, both on Instagram and Facebook, and then you can find us on the web at slaughterfamilyfarm.com, and it's SLAUGHTER. So just like slaughtering an animal.
Yeah. Yeah, if you ever grow big enough that you want to put your own processing facility in, you've got some fun with the name there. So
yeah, the slaughterhouse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Slaughter.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Well, man, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I pray you have a great week.
Yeah, thanks so much. I was just really humbled to be on here. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Well, I really appreciate Justin coming on the podcast. Appreciate his insight and just exciting to see what he's been able to build even through the pandemic. And it looks like he's got more potential there. So if you would like to be on the podcast, by all means, reach out to me. You can email me directly, troy@redtoolhouse.com. Prefer you use our pre-screening form because that just gives me a little bit of history, gives me talking points as I start to fashion the questions in my head. And you can find that at thepasturedpig.com and just click on the link at the top, be a podcast guest. Fill that information out. We'll reach out to you, get you scheduled, and then hopefully have a fun conversation. I've yet to have a conversation. I'd say, that's really a drag. I really have lost an hour of my life talking to that individual. I haven't run into that yet, and I pray I never do. I don't think that's going to be the case, but I've really enjoyed all the conversations we've had. Okay, so I'm going to move on. Let's move on, and I will see you guys, or at least talk to you guys, 2 weeks from now. All right. Pray y'all have a great week. Take care.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. To learn more about our podcast or to submit topics or recommend guests for future episodes, visit redtoolhouse.com.